The massive chamber stretched out like a small city, filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Some walked on legs, others floated in the air, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special suits. 300 different species had gathered here today, and they all had one purpose: to decide the fate of humanity. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood in the center of the room, alone. He wore a simple black suit, looking small compared to the giant aliens around him. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his face showed no emotion. He had been preparing for this moment for 5 years, ever since Earth had first made contact with the Galactic Council. The Zelnari Chancellor rose from her seat. She was a being made of living crystal, shimmering with colors that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Her voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. "We have reviewed Earth's petition for protected status," she announced. "We have studied their history, their culture, and their nature. The Council has reached a decision." Daniel felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his face calm. Behind him, the holographic display showed Earth, a small blue planet spinning peacefully in space. It looked so innocent, so beautiful, but he knew what the Council saw when they looked at humanity's home. "The vote is complete," the Chancellor continued. 287 species have voted against Earth's petition. 13 have voted in favor. The petition is denied. A wave of sound rippled through the chamber. Some species cheered, others remained silent. Daniel closed his eyes for just a moment. It was exactly what he had expected, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. The Chancellor was not finished. She raised one crystalline hand, and the chamber fell silent again. Furthermore, the Council declares Earth a prohibited development zone. Effective immediately, all human vessels are forbidden from leaving their solar system. No exceptions. No appeals. Humanity is quarantined. Now Daniel's jaw tightened. This was worse than he had feared. A simple denial would have been bad enough, but a quarantine meant Earth was being treated like a disease that needed to be contained. "The Council has spoken," the Chancellor said. Her voice filled with something that sounded like satisfaction. "Humanity is too violent, too unpredictable, and too dangerous. You wage war on your own kind. You destroy your own planet. You cannot be trusted among civilized species. This decision is final." Daniel Hayes looked up at the Chancellor and then slowly scanned the entire chamber. He saw fear in some eyes, disgust in others, and superiority in most. These ancient civilizations looked at humanity and saw only primitives who needed to be locked away. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the vast space without any electronic amplification. "You will regret this decision. All of you." The Chancellor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is that a threat, human?" "It is a prediction," Daniel replied calmly. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. As the doors closed behind him, the Council members began to talk among themselves. Most were relieved. Some were celebrating. A few looked worried, but they kept their concerns to themselves. None of them truly understood what they had just done. Daniel Hayes walked down the long corridor to his ship. His hands were shaking now that no one could see him. He had known this might happen, but knowing and experiencing were two different things. Earth had tried to join the galactic community peacefully. They had offered friendship, trade, and cooperation, and they had been rejected and imprisoned. He reached his small shuttle and climbed inside. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. Only then did he allow himself to show emotion. His fist hit the wall once, hard enough to hurt. "They have no idea what they have just done," he whispered to himself. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat and pulled out a small communication device. It was special technology, something the Council did not know humans possessed. He entered a long code and waited. After 3 seconds, a woman's face appeared on the screen. Admiral Kate Morrison looked tired. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating something that was supposed to remain secret for at least another year. But plans had to change now. "The vote?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. "Denied. 287 against. And they have issued a full quarantine," Daniel said. "No human ships beyond the solar system." "They are locking us in." Kate's face hardened. Behind her, Daniel could see the massive command center of the Human Defense Initiative. Screens covered every wall, showing star maps, ship positions, and tactical data. Everything had been hidden from the Council, built in secret over the past 20 years while Earth pretended to be peaceful and cooperative. "All teams are ready." Kate said quietly. "Just waiting for your signal." Daniel thought about it for a long moment. Once he gave this order, there was no going back. Earth would be at war with the entire Galactic Council. Billions of lives hung in the balance. But he also thought about what the Chancellor had said. Too violent, too dangerous, too primitive. He thought about humanity being locked in their own solar system forever, never allowed to explore the stars, never permitted to take their place in the galaxy. "Execute Operation Breakout," Daniel said firmly. "All teams, all targets. Show them what dangerous really means." Kate nodded once. "Understood. The fleet is moving now." The communication ended. Daniel started his shuttle's engines and set course for Earth. By the time he arrived home in 3 days, the galaxy would be a very different place. On Earth, Kate Morrison stood in the command center and took a deep breath. Around her, hundreds of officers sat at their stations, waiting. She walked to the center of the room and pressed a button on the main console. "This is Admiral Morrison," she announced. "Operation Breakout is now active. All ships proceed to your assigned positions. All teams begin your missions. And remember, we are not seeking war. We are demanding freedom. Show them precision. Show them discipline. Show them that humanity will not be caged." Across Earth's solar system, 200 warships that had been hiding in the shadows suddenly activated their engines. They had been waiting in silence for years, disguised as asteroids hidden in gas clouds and buried on dark moons. Now they moved as one, heading for the stars. In his office, President Jack Coleman watched the ships depart on a private screen. He knew that in a few hours he would have to address the people of Earth and explain why their planet was about to face the entire galaxy. But for now, he just watched the ships go and hoped that humanity was ready for what came next. The Galactic Council had made their decision. They had voted to keep humanity locked away, to deny them their future among the stars. It was, without question, the biggest mistake they had ever made. 3 months had passed since the Council's verdict. In that time, the galaxy had settled into a comfortable belief that the human problem was solved. Earth was contained, isolated, and no longer a concern. The Council members went back to their normal routines, confident that they had made the right choice. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Lisa Grant sat in the command chair of the HDI Defiance, watching her crew prepare for the jump. The Defiance was a stealth carrier, invisible to every known sensor in the galaxy. For the past 3 months, it had been moving slowly through Council space, mapping defenses and studying patrol patterns. Now it was time to announce humanity's presence. Lisa was 42 years old, with short black hair and sharp green eyes. She had been a naval officer for 20 years before joining the Human Defense Initiative. She knew this mission would either make her a hero or a war criminal. Possibly both. "Jump coordinates locked," her navigator said. "We are ready, Captain." Lisa looked at the location on her screen. The Council's primary administrative world, right in the heart of their territory. It was the most defended planet in the galaxy, surrounded by sensor networks and patrol ships. Jumping a human vessel there was either brilliant or insane. "Make the jump," she ordered. Space twisted around the Defiance, and suddenly they were there, hanging in orbit above a planet covered in gleaming cities. Alarms immediately started blaring across the entire system. The Council's defense network had detected them instantly. Lisa smiled. That was exactly what she wanted. "Open all communication channels," she said. "Let everyone hear this." Her communications officer nodded and activated every frequency used in Council space. Lisa stood up and spoke clearly. "This is Captain Lisa Grant of the human vessel Defiance. The Galactic Council has declared my people prisoners in our own solar system. We reject this authority. We reject this judgment. And we reject this cage you have tried to build around us. Come and enforce your will if you can." Within minutes, 17 Council warships appeared surrounding the Defiance. They were sleek vessels, each one 3 times the size of Lisa's ship. They had been built over centuries by civilizations that had mastered space travel long before humans had learned to make fire. The lead Council ship transmitted a message. "Human vessel, you have violated the quarantine. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded or you will be destroyed." Lisa looked at her tactical officer, a young man named Ryan who had been waiting for this moment. "Show them what we brought." The Defiance's weapon ports opened. But these were not the energy weapons or missile systems that the Council expected. Instead, banks of directed energy projectors activated, technology that humans had developed in secret. The Council had banned certain research areas centuries ago, declaring them too dangerous. Humanity had ignored those bans completely. Fire, Lisa said calmly. Beams of concentrated energy lanced out from the Defiance, striking each Council ship with perfect precision. But the weapons did not explode or penetrate the hulls. Instead, they melted the weapon systems, turning advanced plasma cannons into useless slag in seconds. Before the Council ships could react, a second wave of fire disabled their engines. The entire engagement took 4 minutes. Then Lisa ordered the deployment of kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods, each one moving at tremendous speed, struck the Council ships' communication arrays and sensor systems. The ships were now blind, deaf, and unable to fight or flee. Scan for life signs, Lisa ordered. Her science officer checked the readings. All Council ships show crew alive and unharmed, Captain. We have disabled them without killing anyone. Lisa nodded. That was important. Humanity was not trying to start a massacre. They were sending a message about capability, not cruelty. Broadcast again, she said. All Council forces, this is Captain Grant. We have disabled your ships without harming your crews. This is a demonstration. You tried to cage humanity. You failed. Your quarantine is void. Any further attempts to enforce it will be met with the same response. Then she gave the order that would change everything. Navigator, jump us out. Head for the next coordinates. The Defiance vanished, leaving 17 disabled Council ships floating in orbit. But something else was happening across the galaxy. At that exact moment, 67 other human ships decloaked in Council-controlled systems. They appeared near military bases, trade stations, and government centers. Each ship broadcast the same message Lisa had sent. Each one had the same mission: prove that humanity could not be contained. The galaxy watched in shock as human vessels moved freely through space that was supposed to be forbidden to them. News spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. Humanity had not just violated the quarantine, they had shattered it completely. On the Council's military headquarters, Fleet Commander Zarn received the reports with growing fury. He was a Crothian, a warrior species that had served as the Council's primary military force for 300 years. His people believed deeply in honor, discipline, and the chain of command. What humanity had done was not just illegal, it was an insult. Zarn was a massive being, standing nearly 3 meters tall with deep red skin and 4 powerful arms. He had fought in dozens of campaigns and never lost a battle. He looked at the tactical display showing human ships scattered across Council space, and his anger turned cold and focused. Mobilize the peacekeeping armada, he ordered. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. We will crush this human rebellion and remind the galaxy why the Council's word is law. His officers scrambled to obey. Within hours, 600 warships began moving from their various posts, converging on a single meeting point. It was the largest military deployment the Council had made in 3 centuries. The last time they had assembled a force this size, they had stopped a war between 2 major civilizations. Zarn stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the fleet gather. 600 ships representing the combined military might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Surely this would be enough to deal with a few hundred human vessels. He had no idea that humanity had been planning for exactly this response. On Earth, Admiral Kate Morrison watched the Council fleet movements on her displays. Every ship was being tracked, every communication intercepted. The Council thought their quantum encryption was unbreakable. They did not know that humans had cracked it 2 years ago. They are doing exactly what we predicted, said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks, standing beside her. He was young, only 28, but he had a mind that understood tactical patterns better than anyone Kate had ever met. Ryan had designed the plan they were about to execute. When he had first presented it, half the command staff thought he was crazy. The other half thought he was a genius. Kate had listened to the entire proposal and approved it immediately. How long until their fleet is fully assembled? Kate asked. 18 hours, Ryan replied. Then they will need another 6 hours to organize their formation and plan their attack. They are creatures of habit, Admiral. They will follow the same tactical doctrines they have used for centuries. Kate smiled grimly. And that is exactly why they will lose. Send the signal to Captain Grant. Tell her to lead them to Proxima. We will end this there. The message was transmitted instantly through humanity's quantum communication network. Every human ship in the galaxy received it at the same moment. They began moving immediately, not fleeing but repositioning. They were leading the Council fleet exactly where humanity wanted them to go. Fleet Commander Zarn received reports that the human ships were retreating toward the Proxima Centauri system. He saw it as confirmation that humans were afraid. They were running back to their neighborhood seeking the protection of familiar space. "Set course for Proxima Centauri," he ordered. "We will corner them there and finish this. The Council's honor will be restored." His fleet began moving as 600 ships heading toward humanity's nearest colony. Zarn felt confident. His forces outnumbered the human fleet 3-1. His ships had centuries of proven technology. His crews were trained in tactics that had won countless victories. What he did not know was that every human ship in the galaxy was also heading to Proxima. And they were bringing weapons and strategies that the Council had never imagined possible. The trap was set. The Council was coming, and humanity was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The Council's peacekeeping armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. 600 warships emerged from the darkness of hyperspace, their weapons charged and ready. Fleet Commander Zarn stood on the bridge of his flagship, expecting to find a small human colony and perhaps a few dozen defending ships. What he saw instead made him freeze in disbelief. 200 human warships waited in formation around Proxima Centauri. They were not hiding or running. They were arranged in a pattern that made no sense according to any military doctrine Zarn had ever studied. The ships formed a loose sphere with huge gaps between them, as if inviting the Council fleet to attack from any direction. "This is madness," Zarn muttered. "They are giving us every advantage." His tactical officer, a cautious being from a species known for careful planning, spoke up. "Commander, perhaps this is a trap. Should we proceed with caution?" Zarn's pride overruled his officer's concern. He had 600 ships against 200. He had superior numbers, superior technology built over centuries, and 300 years of military tradition backing every decision. The humans were offering him an easy victory, and he would take it. "All ships advance in standard assault formation," Zarn ordered. "We will sweep through their lines and end this quickly." The Council fleet began moving forward, arranging themselves in a formation that had won battles for 3 centuries. Ships grouped by size and function, with heavy cruisers in front, support vessels in the middle, and fast attack ships on the flanks. It was textbook military strategy, proven effective time and time again. On the human flagship, Captain Lisa Grant watched the Council fleet approach. She stood calmly on her bridge, surrounded by displays showing every Council ship's position, speed, and weapon status. Her crew was silent, focused, waiting for her command. "They are doing exactly what Admiral Morrison predicted," Lisa said quietly. "They cannot imagine that we know their tactics better than they do themselves." Her weapons officer, a woman named Helen who had spent 5 years studying Council military history, spoke up. "Council fleet is in optimal range for their weapons in 30 seconds, Captain." "Wait for it," Lisa said. "Let them commit fully." The Council ships continued forward, building speed. Zarn smiled on his flagship, confident that victory was moments away. His ships would crash through the human formation like a hammer through glass. "Fire on my mark," he ordered, watching the distance close. That was when the humans opened fire, but they did not shoot at the Council ships. Instead, every human vessel fired thousands of tungsten rods into the empty space between the 2 fleets. The rods were small, simple, and moving at a significant fraction of light speed. They created a wall of kinetic death invisible until it was too late. The first wave of Council ships flew directly into the barrier. The tungsten rods, moving faster than sensors could track, tore through shields and hulls. Explosions bloomed across the space between the fleets. In the first 2 minutes, 80 Council ships were destroyed or disabled. Zarn watched in horror as his carefully planned assault fell apart. "Evasive maneuvers!" he shouted. "Pull back and regroup." But the human fleet was already moving. They broke their strange formation and split into dozens of smaller groups, each group moving with perfect coordination. It was as if they were all controlled by a single mind, responding to the Council's movements before Zarn could even issue new orders. What Zarn did not know was that every human ship was connected through quantum communication technology. Each vessel was in instant contact with every other vessel, sharing data and coordinating movements faster than any traditional fleet could manage. The humans did not need to wait for orders. They were all receiving the same information at the same time and responding as one. Zarn tried a flanking maneuver, a classic council tactic. He sent his fast attack ships around to strike the human fleet from the side, while his main force pressed forward. It was a strategy that had worked in every major battle for the past 3 centuries. Captain Lisa Grant saw the maneuver developing and smiled. They are so predictable. Execute counter pattern 7. The human fleet shifted again, but not in any way that made sense to council military thinking. Some ships accelerated forward, others dropped back, and a few seemed to move at random. But there was a pattern, one designed specifically to counter the exact tactic Zarn was using. The council's flanking force found themselves suddenly surrounded by human ships that had appeared from directions they were not watching. Before they could react, the human vessels opened fire with directed energy weapons, melting gun systems and engines with surgical precision. On one of the human carriers, Colonel Andrew Peterson commanded the drone fighter wings. The council had banned artificial intelligence centuries ago, fearing what self-aware machines might do. Humans had no such restrictions. Peterson's fighters were controlled by advanced AI systems, each one capable of making thousands of tactical decisions per second. Launch all fighters, Peterson ordered. Show them what they gave up when they banned AI. Thousands of small fighters erupted from the human carriers. They moved in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually perfectly calculated. Each drone knew where every other drone was and adjusted its movements accordingly. They swarmed the council ships like angry insects, too fast and too numerous to track. The council's point defense systems tried to shoot down the drones, but the AI-controlled fighters dodged with inhuman precision. They struck at weak points in the council ships, targeting sensor arrays, communication systems, and weapon ports. They did not try to destroy the ships, but to blind and disable them. Zarn watched his fleet fall apart around him. Ships collided as they tried to retreat, their sensors damaged and communication disrupted. Panic spread through his forces as they realized they were fighting an enemy that thought and moved in ways they could not predict or counter. Regroup at Point Delta, Zarn ordered desperately. All ships fall back to defensive formation, but his orders were not reaching all his ships. The human drones had destroyed too many communication arrays. Parts of his fleet were operating blind, unable to receive commands or coordinate with other vessels. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The council fleet, built on centuries of tradition and proven tactics, could not adapt to an enemy that fought in completely new ways. Every time Zarn tried a different strategy, the humans countered it as if they had known it was coming, because they had. Admiral Morrison and her team had spent 20 years studying every battle the council had ever fought. They knew the council's tactics better than the council themselves, and they had designed counters for every single one. As the 6th hour ended, Zarn looked at his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Defeat. Of his 600 ships, only 230 remained functional. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or had retreated in panic, and he had not destroyed a single human vessel. Not one. All ships full retreat, Zarn ordered, his voice hollow. Withdraw to council space. The remaining council ships turned and fled, jumping to hyperspace as quickly as their damaged engines could manage. The human fleet let them go. They had made their point. Captain Lisa Grant stood on her bridge and watched the council fleet disappear. Around her, her crew remained silent, processing what they had just accomplished. They had faced the galaxy's most powerful military force and won decisively. Send a message to Admiral Morrison, Lisa said quietly. Tell her the battle is over. The council's armada is broken. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched recordings of the battle. News spread through every network, every communication channel. The unthinkable had happened. Humanity, the species deemed too primitive and dangerous for galactic society, had destroyed the council's military might in a single engagement. On Earth, Admiral Kate Morrison received Lisa's message and allowed herself a small smile. The military phase of the operation was complete. Now came the harder part, rebuilding the galaxy's political structure. President Jack Coleman prepared to address not just Earth but the entire galaxy. The Council had tried to cage humanity, and humanity had broken free. Now it was time to show the galaxy what came next. The Battle of Proxima was over. The Council's era of unchallenged power was finished, and a new chapter in galactic history was beginning, whether the old civilizations were ready for it or not. The weeks following the Battle of Proxima brought changes to the galaxy that no one had imagined possible. The Council, which had governed galactic affairs for thousands of years, suddenly found its authority crumbling like ancient stone. 12 species withdrew from the Council in the first week alone. They sent formal declarations explaining that an organization unable to protect its own military fleet could not be trusted to govern the galaxy. More withdrawals followed each day. Some species left quietly. Others made dramatic public announcements. All of them cited the same reason. The Council had become weak and ineffective. Ambassador Daniel Hayes, who had been recalled to Earth after the original quarantine verdict, now found himself in an unusual position. His personal communication device had not stopped alerting him for days. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. Species that had voted against humanity now sought meetings, treaties, and trade agreements. Fear had transformed into respect, and respect had brought opportunity. Daniel sat in his office in New York looking at the long list of diplomatic requests. There were so many that he would need a year just to read them all. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. President Jack Coleman entered, looking tired but satisfied. The president was a tall man with gray hair and a face that showed the stress of leading humanity through its most dangerous period. He sat down across from Daniel and sighed. "They are all terrified now," Coleman said. "Every species that voted to quarantine us is now scrambling to make deals. It would be funny if it was not so predictable." Daniel nodded. "Fear is a powerful motivator, but we cannot build a future on fear alone, sir. If we want lasting change, we need to offer them something better than what the Council provided." "Agreed," Coleman said, "which is why I am approving your proposal. We are not going to simply join the galactic community on new terms. We are going to reshape it entirely." Daniel had been working on this plan since before the quarantine vote. He had suspected that the Council would reject Earth, and he had prepared for what came next. But his plan was not about conquest or revenge. It was about fixing a broken system. Dr. Helen Carter was the key to understanding why that system was broken. She was a xenoanthropologist, someone who studied alien cultures and societies. For years, she had been analyzing the Council and its member species, looking for patterns in how the galaxy was governed. What she found was disturbing. Helen sat in a conference room with Daniel and several other human leaders. She pulled up a holographic display showing thousands of data points, each one representing a species, a vote, or a political decision made by the Council over the past millennium. "Look at this pattern," Helen said, highlighting certain data points in red. "Every time a species shows significant technological innovation, the Council finds a way to slow them down. Trade restrictions, resource limitations, or diplomatic isolation. They never say it directly, but the effect is always the same." Daniel studied the display. "They are suppressing progress." "Exactly," Helen confirmed. "The Council maintains power not through cooperation but through calculated suppression. Any species that becomes too independent or too innovative gets pushed back. And if they resist, they get quarantined, just like Earth." Another officer in the room, Commander Victoria Lane, added her findings. Victoria ran human intelligence operations, and she had been digging into Council secrets for months. What she uncovered made everyone in the room angry. "It gets worse," Victoria said, pulling up classified Council documents that human hackers had stolen. "The Council's inner circle, the 5 founding species, have been manipulating votes for centuries. They decide what gets voted on, when it gets voted on, and they influence how other species vote through threats and bribes." The documents showed a pattern of corruption that went back hundreds of years. The Council was not a democratic organization. It was a carefully controlled system designed to keep the founding species in power while giving everyone else the illusion of participation. Daniel felt his jaw tighten as he read through the evidence. "They have been lying to the entire galaxy. For centuries," Victoria confirmed. "And now we have proof. The decision was made quickly. If humanity wanted to change the galaxy, they needed to expose the truth." Ambassador Hayes prepared to release all the evidence to every news network, every communication channel, every species that would listen. The reaction was explosive. Protests erupted on 100 worlds within days. Species that had supported the Council for generations now demanded answers. How long had they been manipulated? How many of their votes had been influenced by secret threats? How much of their development had been deliberately held back? The Council tried to deny everything. The Zelnari Chancellor, the same being who had delivered Earth's quarantine verdict with such contempt, held a press conference declaring the documents were human forgeries designed to sow chaos, but other species were not convinced. They started investigating on their own, finding more evidence that confirmed what humanity had revealed. The Council's authority crumbled faster each day. Within 2 months, half the Council's member species had either withdrawn or were openly calling for the organization's dissolution. The galaxy's political structure, stable for thousands of years, was collapsing, and everyone was looking to humanity for guidance. General Nathan Ford commanded the expanded human fleet operations. After the Battle of Proxima, Earth had accelerated its ship construction, building new vessels with technology shared by species that had allied with humanity. The fleet had grown from 200 ships to over 500. Nathan received reports daily from species requesting military assistance. Council loyalists, desperate to maintain the old order, were attacking worlds that spoke out against them. 12 different species needed help defending themselves. "We cannot protect everyone," Nathan said during a command meeting. "We do not have enough ships and we cannot be everywhere at once." Admiral Kate Morrison, who now served as Nathan's senior advisor, had a solution. "We do not need to protect everyone ourselves. We need to teach them to protect themselves. Provide weapons, training, and tactical support. Let them defend their own worlds." It was a radical idea. The Council had always maintained that only they could be trusted with advanced military technology. But humanity took a different approach. They shared their weapons technology freely with any species that requested it, along with training on how to use it. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Species that had been dependent on the Council for protection suddenly found themselves capable of defending their own territory. It shifted the balance of power dramatically. 6 months after the Council's vote against Earth, the Galactic Council was on the verge of complete collapse. A vote was called for its dissolution. The species that had once enforced galactic law were now being judged by those they had controlled. The vote was not even close. 312 species voted to dissolve the Council. Only 15 voted to keep it, mostly the founding species and their closest allies. The Zelnari Chancellor stood in the Great Chamber one last time, looking out at the species that were abandoning her. She tried to speak, to remind them of the peace and stability the Council had provided for millennia. But her words fell on deaf ears. The galaxy had seen the truth. Peace built on suppression and lies was not real peace. It was just control wearing a pleasant mask. As the Council dissolved, Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood ready with humanity's proposal for what came next. President Coleman had approved it, and dozens of species had already signed on. It was time to build something new, something better. But not everyone was ready to accept this new order. The Zelnari and a few other founding species refused to participate. They withdrew to their home systems, bitter and angry. Some swore revenge. Others simply disappeared from galactic affairs entirely. Daniel knew that these holdouts could be a problem in the future. But for now, the galaxy had a chance to rebuild itself on principles of freedom and cooperation, rather than fear and control. The Council had voted against Earth, trying to cage humanity and preserve their own power. In doing so, they had sparked a revolution that ended their reign and opened the door to a new era. The galaxy would never be the same again. 1 year had passed since the Council's fateful vote against Earth. The Great Chamber where that decision had been made now hosted a very different gathering. Ambassador Daniel Hayes stood in the same spot where he had received humanity's quarantine sentence. But this time he was not alone and not asking for permission. Representatives from 147 species filled the chamber. They had come to witness the creation of something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The Galactic Council was gone, dissolved by the very species it had claimed to protect. In its place, humanity proposed the Free Systems Alliance. Daniel looked out at the assembled beings and felt the weight of the moment. This was not about human dominance or revenge. This was about building a system where no species would ever be suppressed or quarantined for being different. The old council governed through fear and control, Daniel said, his voice carrying through the chamber. They decided who could advance and who must remain stagnant. They chose which species deserved freedom and which needed to be contained. That era is over. He activated a holographic display showing the proposed charter for the Free Systems Alliance. The principles were simple: mutual respect, unrestricted technological development, genuine cooperation, and most importantly, no species could be isolated or quarantined without overwhelming evidence of actual harm to others. This alliance will not rule over you, Daniel continued. It will serve you. Each species maintains complete sovereignty over their own affairs. We share knowledge freely, defend each other willingly, and grow together without artificial limits. The first signature on the charter was Earth's. Then, one by one, other species added theirs. Some signed immediately, eager to embrace this new vision. Others took time, discussing among themselves before committing. But by the end of the day, 147 species had joined the Free Systems Alliance. It was the largest peaceful cooperation in galactic history. President Jack Coleman addressed the inaugural session of the Alliance from Earth. His image was broadcast to every member world, reaching billions of beings across the galaxy. Humanity did not seek to lead, Coleman said. We were forced into this role by the Council's arrogance and fear. They saw our capacity for violence and assumed we desired it. They looked at our history of conflict and decided we were too dangerous for the stars. He paused, letting his words sink in. But they missed something crucial. Yes, humans can be violent. Yes, we have fought terrible wars among ourselves. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have built peace from conflict, cooperation from competition, and hope from despair. That is humanity's true strength. Not our weapons, but our refusal to accept someone else's limitations on what we can become. The speech resonated across the galaxy. Species that had feared humanity now understood them better. The violence that the Council had condemned was not humanity's defining feature. It was their determination, their creativity, and their stubborn insistence on freedom that made them who they were. Captain Lisa Grant received a promotion to Admiral and was given command of the Alliance Defense Fleet. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the AFS Unity, and marveled at what she saw. The Unity was not a human ship. It was a collaborative construction project involving 30 different species, each contributing their best technology. The hull design came from the Crothians, the same warrior species that had once led the Council's fleet against Earth. The power systems were developed by the Tarlans, master engineers who had joined the Alliance early. Weapon systems, shields, sensors, and engines all came from different worlds, different minds, different approaches to the same problems. The result was a vessel more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. This is what we can achieve when we work together, Lisa said to her crew, which included beings from 20 different species. Not just humans, not just one civilization, but all of us sharing our knowledge and building something greater. The former Council species faced a difficult choice. They could join the Alliance on equal terms with everyone else, or they could retreat into isolation. Most chose to join, recognizing that the old ways were gone forever. They brought centuries of knowledge and experience, contributing to the Alliance's rapid growth. But the Zelnari and a few others refused. The Zelnari Chancellor, stripped of her power and influence, sent a final message to the Alliance before withdrawing to her home system. You have built your alliance on the foundation of chaos, she warned. Without guidance, without control, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Mark my words, humanity's empire will fall just as the Council has fallen. Admiral Kate Morrison, now serving as the Alliance's chief military strategist, read the message and shook her head. The Chancellor still did not understand. The Alliance was not an empire. Empires were built on conquest and control. The Alliance was built on something the Council had never truly understood: trust. Let them hide in their systems, Kate said. The galaxy is moving forward, with or without them. Dr. Helen Carter established the Alliance Institute of Technology in orbit around Earth. It was a massive station where scientists from across the galaxy could work together, sharing knowledge without fear of suppression. The Council had banned certain areas of research, declaring them too dangerous. The Institute had no such restrictions. Within months, breakthroughs occurred at a pace unseen in galactic history. Faster-than-light communication became more efficient. Medical treatments advanced by decades in mere weeks. Energy systems were revolutionized. And perhaps most importantly, species began to truly understand each other through collaborative work. A young Crothian scientist worked alongside a human researcher, developing new shield technology. A Tarlan engineer partnered with an Earth mathematician, solving problems in quantum mechanics. Knowledge flowed freely, and the galaxy advanced faster than anyone had imagined possible. 10 years after the original vote, Ambassador Daniel Hayes prepared for retirement. He had spent a decade helping to build the alliance, watching it grow from 147 species to over 200. The galaxy had changed more in those 10 years than in the previous 1,000. On his last day in office, a young diplomat from the Crothian species came to see him. Her name was Kara, and she had been born the same year the Council quarantined Earth. She had grown up in a galaxy transformed by humanity's refusal to accept that quarantine. "Ambassador Hayes," Kara said, her forearms gesturing respectfully, "I have studied the history of the Council vote and everything that came after. I have one question that I cannot answer on my own. Did you always know it would end this way?" Daniel smiled and gestured for her to sit. He thought about the question carefully before answering. "The Council made one critical error," he said finally. "They judged humanity by our past without considering our future. They saw our capacity for war and assumed we desired it. They looked at our conflicts and decided we were dangerous. But they never considered that our greatest strength was not our weapons or our tactics." "Then what was it?" Kara asked, genuinely curious. "Our stubborn refusal to accept someone else's limitations on what we could become," Daniel replied. "Every human achievement, from learning to fly to reaching the stars, came from refusing to accept that something was impossible just because someone said so. The Council told us we could not join the galaxy. We refused to accept that, and in refusing we changed everything." Kara nodded slowly, understanding. "The Council feared your violence, but they should have feared your determination." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Violence is a tool, neither good nor evil on its own. It is the will behind it that matters. The Council used their power to suppress and control. We used ours to liberate and build. That is the difference." The young diplomat stood and bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Ambassador. The galaxy is better because humanity refused to stay caged." After Kara left, Daniel sat alone in his office one last time. He looked out at Earth, the small blue planet that had been declared too dangerous for the stars. Now that planet was the heart of an alliance that spanned hundreds of worlds and thousands of light years. The Council had voted against Earth, declaring humanity a threat that needed to be contained. In their arrogance, they had awakened something they could not control, humanity's determination to be free. It had been their final mistake. And it had been humanity's finest hour. The galaxy would never forget the lesson. Never try to cage a species that believes in freedom. Because when you do not get compliance. You get revolution. And sometimes that revolution changes everything for the better. Daniel Hayes smiled one last time and turned off the lights in his office. His work was done. The future belonged to the next generation, human and alien alike, working together in a galaxy finally free from the chains of the past. The stars were open to everyone now, and that, Daniel thought, was exactly how it should be.